For thousands of years, people believed history was shaped by kings, armies, and empires. But what if one ordinary fruit quietly changed civilization long before any throne was built? Long before cities existed, the true story of civilization was already unfolding beneath the ground, where tiny seeds waited for their chance to shape the future. Millions of years before the first farmer, endless forests stretched across the mountains of Central Asia, home to the wild ancestors of every apple we know today. These forests were not planted by human hands. They were shaped by time, climate, animals, and survival itself. Long before humans understood farming, animals unknowingly became the world's first gardeners, carrying apple seeds across continents. Rain awakened sleeping seeds, beginning a cycle repeated for countless generations, one that would eventually feed the world. Drawn by sunlight, the fragile shoot pushed through the earth, beginning a journey that would span thousands of years. Seasons passed, generations came and went, yet the tree continued growing, silently witnessing the rise of humanity. Then, one day, everything changed. A small group of wandering humans stepped into the forest, unaware they were about to begin one of history's greatest partnerships. The first humans did not plant apple trees. They simply followed them. Drawn by color, fragrance, and hunger, these wild fruits offered a rare reward in a world where every meal was uncertain. Without realizing it, a single bite would begin one of the longest partnerships in human history. Hidden inside every apple was something far more valuable than its sweet flesh, a handful of tiny seeds carrying millions of years of evolution. Each one held the blueprint for another forest. Seeds rarely grew where they first fell. Birds, bears, deer, and horses carried them across mountains and valleys, allowing wild apple forests to spread farther with every passing generation. As glaciers advanced and climates shifted, countless plants disappeared. Yet wild apple trees endured, adapting to cold, drought, and changing seasons with remarkable resilience. When the ice retreated, life rushed back. Rivers carved new valleys, forests expanded, and wild apple trees reclaimed the mountains with renewed strength. For generations, hunter-gatherers returned to the same forests. They learned which trees bore sweeter fruit, which valleys offered larger harvests, and when nature was ready to provide. Without realizing it, humans were becoming nature's newest selective force. Again and again, they favored sweeter apples, unknowingly influencing the future of the species. Near campsites, discarded seeds began to sprout. Trees appeared closer to human settlements, creating the first accidental orchards long before anyone imagined farming. Humanity had not yet invented agriculture, but the partnership had already begun. The forests were changing people, and people were quietly changing the forests. Together, they were preparing the next great chapter of civilization. For countless generations, humans gathered whatever nature provided. Then, almost unnoticed, they made a revolutionary decision. Instead of simply searching for the sweetest apples, they began returning to the very same trees, recognizing that some were worth protecting. Every harvest became a lesson. Families remembered which trees produced sweeter fruit, larger harvests, and stronger branches. Knowledge was no longer written by nature alone. It was carried in human memory. The finest apples were no longer eaten immediately. Their seeds were saved with purpose, planted closer to camps where people could watch them grow. Humanity had taken its first deliberate step toward cultivation. Unlike the scattered forests beyond the mountains, these young trees grew beside human shelters. Their survival depended not only on nature, but on human care. Seeds carried surprises. No two trees were exactly alike. But eventually, people discovered a remarkable technique, joining the branch of one tree to another. It was the beginning of grafting, one of agriculture's greatest breakthroughs. For the first time, rows of apple trees appeared together by human design. What had once been wilderness was becoming an orchard, a living partnership between people and nature. Travelers noticed these remarkable orchards. As people moved between valleys, they carried apples, seeds, and stories with them. The fruit was beginning a journey far beyond its mountain birthplace. The apple was changing. Through human choice, sweeter fruit became more common. Through nature, new varieties continued to emerge. Together, evolution and cultivation shaped a fruit unlike any before. Long before written history, humanity had already begun reshaping one of nature's greatest gifts. The humble apple was no longer merely a wild fruit. It was becoming a companion of civilization itself. Ahead lay kingdoms, empires, and trade routes that would carry it across the world. For thousands of years, people followed the seasons. But as orchards flourished and harvests became more dependable, something extraordinary happened. Families no longer needed to wander endlessly. They began building homes where the trees could feed them year after year. A successful harvest meant more than food. It meant survival. As baskets filled with fruit, communities gathered to celebrate the changing seasons, giving thanks for the trees that had become part of their lives. The greatest harvest meant little if it could not survive the winter. People learned to store apples in cool shelters, preserving precious food long after the leaves had fallen.
Healthy orchards demanded more than rain alone. Early farmers guided streams through hand-dug channels, learning that controlling water meant controlling the future of their harvest. Each spring, the orchards transformed into seas of white blossoms. Bees carried pollen from flower to flower, quietly performing the work that no human could replace. Farmers came to understand that every harvest began with patience. Blossoms became fruit, fruit became seeds, and seeds promised another generation. Agriculture was no longer an experiment. It had become a rhythm of life.
Soon, orchards produced more fruit than a single family could eat. Apples became something new. Not merely food, but a valuable item to exchange for stone, pottery, salt, and other necessities. What began in one fertile valley was spreading farther every generation. Travelers carried apples along winding mountain trails, introducing new communities to a fruit unlike any they had seen before. Permanent farms gave rise to permanent villages. Villages grew into towns, and towns would one day become cities. Beside them stood orchards that had helped make settlement possible. The apple had become woven into the earliest foundations of civilization. As villages became kingdoms, orchards became symbols of prosperity. To rule fertile land was to command food, wealth, and stability. Among the carefully tended trees, the apple had become more than nourishment. It had become a mark of civilization itself. Across the ancient world, the apple entered myth as well as history. In stories passed from generation to generation, it became a symbol of beauty, temptation, wisdom, and even conflict. Few fruits carried such powerful meaning. In the great Persian Empire, orchards became masterpieces of engineering. Carefully designed gardens combined flowing water, shade, and fruit trees into living works of art, places where nature and architecture existed in perfect harmony. Empires connected lands that had once stood apart. Along newly built roads, apples traveled farther than ever before, carried by soldiers, merchants, and explorers crossing continents. To the Greeks, the apple represented knowledge, beauty, and philosophy. In bustling marketplaces and quiet academies alike, it was as familiar to scholars as it was to farmers. The Romans transformed fruit growing into a science. They expanded orchards across Europe, perfected grafting techniques, and carefully documented how to cultivate healthier, more productive trees. After Rome faded, many orchards fell into neglect. Yet behind monastery walls, dedicated monks carefully preserved ancient varieties, ensuring that centuries of knowledge would not be lost. From monastery gardens to royal estates, apples spread across Europe. New climates produced new flavors, and every region added another chapter to the fruit's remarkable story. The apple had traveled farther than anyone could have imagined, but its greatest journey was still ahead. New oceans, new continents, and new civilizations were waiting beyond the horizon. Soon, the age of global trade would begin. By the 15th century, the world's oceans were no longer barriers. They were highways. Merchant ships carried silk, spices, precious metals, and among their provisions, barrels of carefully stored apples. A fruit born in the mountains of Central Asia was about to circle the globe. Weeks at sea tested every sailor. Fresh food spoiled quickly, but apples, stored in cool barrels, survived long voyages. They became one of the most dependable foods aboard ships that explored unknown waters. From Venice to Constantinople, Lisbon to Amsterdam, bustling ports became crossroads where apples changed hands alongside spices, silk, and silver. Every harbor added another branch to the growing tree of global commerce. Even as ships conquered the seas, ancient land routes remained alive. Along the Silk Road, caravans carried apples through deserts, mountain passes, and fertile valleys, connecting east and west long before modern borders existed. As apples reached new lands, local farmers selected the strongest trees and crossed them with native varieties. Every kingdom created apples uniquely its own, each reflecting its climate, culture, and traditions. In crowded cities, apples became more than food. They were bought, sold, taxed, gifted, and celebrated. Entire economies grew around orchards that had once existed only in distant mountain forests. The age of exploration carried apples farther than ever before. European explorers packed seeds, saplings, and grafted branches aboard ships, preparing to introduce familiar orchards to entirely new continents. Beyond the horizon lay vast lands where apples had never grown. Soon, seeds from the Old World would take root in unfamiliar soil, forever changing the landscapes of North and South America. From a wild forest in Central Asia to the shores of distant continents, the apple had become a traveler unlike any other. Its next chapter would be written through conquest, colonization, and the creation of entirely new worlds. The first apple tree planted in unfamiliar soil represented far more than a harvest. For European settlers, orchards meant permanence. They were a promise that families, farms, and entire communities would one day flourish where wilderness once stood. Across the growing colonies, planting apple trees became a tradition. A new homestead was rarely considered complete until its orchard had taken root, ensuring food, drink, and hope for future generations. As settlements pushed westward, orchards followed. Every wagon carried seeds, grafts, and young trees, transforming distant frontiers into landscapes that felt increasingly familiar. Among the many who carried apples west, one man became a legend. John Chapman, remembered as Johnny Appleseed, traveled thousands of miles planting nurseries that helped shape the expanding American frontier. His story became part history, part folklore. By the 19th century, apples had become a cornerstone of local economies. Orchards supplied fresh fruit, cider, vinegar, livestock feed, and countless products that sustained growing towns and cities. Railroads transformed the apple trade. Fruit that once traveled only a few miles could now reach distant cities in days, connecting rural orchards with millions of consumers. Rapid industrialization created booming cities where millions depended on distant farms. Apples became one of the most reliable fruits, filling markets from New York to London and beyond. As science advanced, farming began to change forever. Orchard owners experimented with improved pruning, fertilizers, and pest control, laying the foundation for modern agriculture. The age of exploration had ended, but the age of innovation was only beginning. Centuries of observation, experimentation, and cultivation had transformed a wild mountain fruit into one of the world's most successful crops. The next revolution would come not from explorers, but from science. For thousands of years, farmers improved apples through observation and experience. Now, scientists began asking a deeper question.
Veins are quite
What
distinct.
hidden instructions
Yes, and the
inside
stamina
every
matches.
seed determined its
Let's examine the
sweetness,
cells.
color,
Incredible
strength,
detail.
and survival? The answers lay within the language of life itself. Within each tiny cell was a complete genetic blueprint. Every apple tree carried millions of years of evolution, encoded in strands of DNA that determined how it would grow, bloom, and bear fruit. Armed with new knowledge, scientists carefully selected parent trees, crossing varieties to produce apples that were sweeter, larger, more colorful, and better suited to changing climates. Breeding became both an art and a science. Success brought new challenges. Insects, fungi, and bacteria threatened orchards around the world. Scientists raced to develop stronger varieties capable of resisting disease without sacrificing flavor. For centuries, apples were limited by the seasons. Refrigeration changed everything. Cold storage allowed fresh fruit to remain crisp for months, making apples available long after the harvest had ended. Modern transportation linked orchards to the world. Refrigerated trucks, cargo ships, and aircraft carried apples across continents, allowing fruit picked in one hemisphere to feed families in another. Consumers came to expect apples that looked almost flawless, bright, crisp, and identical. Behind every perfect fruit stood decades of breeding, careful storage, and remarkable scientific precision. The newest generation of farmers no longer relied only on experience. Satellites, drones, sensors, and
Drones are
artificial
mapping the roads
intelligence
now.
helped monitor every
Live
tree,
data looks
every
good.
leaf,
No
and
issues.
every drop of water
This
with
changes
extraordinary precision. From wild forests to intelligent orchards, the apple's journey reflected humanity's own progress. Every scientific breakthrough made harvests larger, safer, and more reliable. Yet an even greater challenge now stood ahead. Feeding a changing planet would demand innovations unlike any seen before. Today, the apple is grown on every inhabited continent except Antarctica. Every year, tens of millions of tons are harvested to feed billions of people. What began as a wild fruit in the forests of Central Asia has become one of humanity's most successful crops. Modern orchards are no longer managed by instinct alone. Artificial intelligence, weather forecasting, satellite imaging, and autonomous machinery help farmers make thousands of precise decisions every single day. Water has always determined the fate of orchards. Today, precision irrigation delivers exactly the amount each tree needs, conserving one of Earth's most valuable resources while protecting future harvests. Yet modern farming faces a challenge unlike any before. Rising temperatures, unpredictable storms, droughts, and late frosts threaten orchards that have flourished for centuries. Farmers and scientists are
resilient
responding
trees are
with
thriving.
innovation.
The drones show
New
our
apple
field
varieties
winds
are
and
being
temps.
developed to tolerate
check the
heat,
data.
resist
Excellent.
disease,
This
and
could go
survive
global.
the unpredictable climate of the 21st century. Never before have farmers shared knowledge so quickly. Research, technology, and experience now move across continents in moments, helping orchards adapt together to a rapidly changing world. The future of agriculture may depend not only on technology, but on restoring balance. Farmers are welcoming bees, birds, healthy soils, and biodiversity back into their orchards, proving that productivity and conservation can grow together. Every harvest now reflects thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, from prehistoric gatherers to satellite-guided farms. The apple has become a living record of humanity's ability to learn, adapt, and improve. The story of the apple is no longer only about farmers or scientists. It belongs to every person who depends on healthy soils, clean water, stable climates, and the quiet work of orchards around the world. The choices we make today will shape every harvest that follows. The next chapter of the apple has not yet been written. As Earth's climate changes and the global population continues to grow, the challenge is no longer simply producing more food. It is producing it wisely, sustainably, and for everyone. Around the world, scientists preserve the genetic diversity of crops in secure seed banks and living collections. These priceless archives protect ancient varieties that may one day help orchards survive diseases, drought, or climates we cannot yet predict. Inside advanced
The growth
laboratories and
metrics are
greenhouses,
excellent. Initiate
researchers are
light and
developing apple
irrigation
trees that can
adjustment.
tolerate heat, use less water, resist emerging diseases, and continue
Perfect.
feeding future
The entire
generations
system is
without
thriving.
exhausting the land. As cities expand and farmland becomes more limited, agriculture is evolving. While apples still require orchards, advances in controlled environment farming are inspiring new ways to produce food efficiently and reduce pressure on traditional farmland. Tomorrow's farmers may work alongside intelligent machines that monitor every tree, predict weather weeks in advance, and respond instantly to changing conditions. Yet the wisdom guiding those machines will still come from generations of human experience. Artificial intelligence can already forecast flowering, monitor pests, and estimate harvests with remarkable accuracy. These tools help farmers reduce waste, conserve resources, and respond more quickly to an increasingly unpredictable climate. Technology alone cannot secure the future. Healthy soils, clean rivers, pollinating insects, and thriving forests remain essential partners in every harvest. Protecting nature is one of humanity's greatest agricultural investments. Every future orchard begins exactly where this story began, with a single seed. Inside something so small lies the potential to nourish generations, support ecosystems, and remind us that the future often grows from the simplest beginnings. The choices we make today will determine whether future generations inherit thriving orchards or empty fields. Food security is not simply about technology or harvests. It is about stewardship. The story of the apple reminds us that every generation plants trees whose fruit they may never live to taste. Our story began with a single apple falling from an ancient tree. Now, after thousands of years of exploration, cultivation, and discovery, we return to where it all began. Sometimes, history's greatest revolutions grow quietly, one seed at a time. Today, descendants of those first wild trees grow across mountains, valleys, islands, and continents. Though separated by oceans and centuries, every orchard shares the same remarkable ancestry, rooted in the forests of Central Asia. Every apple picked today carries the knowledge of countless generations, gatherers who first tasted wild fruit, farmers who nurtured orchards, scientists who unlocked genetics, and families who cared for the land year after year. Behind every apple lies an invisible network of farmers, pollinators, rivers, researchers, transport workers, and ecosystems. No harvest is the work of one person alone. Civilization itself depends on countless unseen partnerships. Inside that tiny seed is the memory of ancient forests and the promise of future harvests. Every orchard, every civilization, and every generation begins with something small enough to rest in the palm of a hand. Seasons continue their endless rhythm. Blossoms return, fruit ripens, leaves fall, and new trees rise where old ones once stood. The cycle that began millions of years ago still continues today. From space, national borders disappear. What remains are forests, rivers, mountains, and fields that sustain every civilization. The future of food is not the responsibility of one nation. It belongs to all of humanity. In the mountains of Central Asia, wild apple forests still stand. They remind us that the origins of civilization are often hidden in quiet places, waiting for those willing to look beyond the obvious. An apple is easy to overlook, yet behind every bite lies millions of years of evolution, thousands of years of human ingenuity, and the shared efforts of countless generations. The story of civilization is not written only by kings, wars, or monuments. It is also written by forests, seeds, and the quiet harvests that sustain us all. The next chapter is now in our hands.